Hello, hello. Welcome to the Joy of SharePoint. We'll be officially starting here in moments, mere moments. Just want to welcome you guys in, remind you to make sure you have your caffeine of choice at hand because it's hard to SharePoint without caffeine. I guess these days I need to broaden that and say it's hard to Office 365 without caffeine.
We need to come up with a better nickname for Office 365.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe we'll just have a brainstorming session on that.
Yeah, that's just too many syllables.
It's long. It's cumbersome to say. Oh, I'm Central Time. I show it's 11 on the dot, which means for all you Easterners, we've hit noon. So let's get started. I am Joy, the Joy of SharePoint, and I have with me Stephen, my co-pilot for today's webinar. Stephen Wilson is one of my conspirators at Pait Group for all things SharePoint, Office 365, and sarcasm related. Stephen is my go-to guy. How you doing?
I might be your primary conspirator when it comes to
that. This is true. Stephen's going to help balance me out for today's webinar because if you guys remember, it was almost a year ago, maybe not quite, I did my first Teams webinar. And I confess to you guys that when they said, guess what, world? We're going to create a brand new chat-based collaboration platform. I did the biggest eye roll ever. It's like, just stop. We have Skype. We have Yammer. And though we don't talk about it, we have Slack. Why do we need this? This is ridiculous. Oh, it'll last a day. Okay, here we are. We started using it. We started using it a lot. And man, I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan. Stephen is a fan, but he's more cautiously optimistic about things.
You know, from the Pait side, I actually was the one who brought Slack to Pait. And so we had Slack for a few months, really, before Teams came out. And then when Teams came out, someone who's no longer with Pait Group was immediately the world's biggest fan of Teams. And I mean like within 2 days. And I was actually like the reason that I didn't completely flip out about Teams was that within 2 days of using it, it really wasn't, I didn't get that feeling that I get from a lot of products, like where I was using it and I was like, what is this? Like, why? Like I just hit my head on the overhanging bar and why?
For me, it wasn't until our project manager decided that we're going to create a team for each project. And that's where all of our artifacts, our connection information, the sites, our project documentation, all of that's going to go into its own team. And we had that one interface to go to instead of having to nav through our previous delivery site, which is kind of out there. So brings me to my next slide, actually, if I can get my slides to advance. So guys, joining from wherever you are in the world, remember when Teams was new and fresh? Make sure I am sharing my screen. I am. It says I'm showing.
You are. I'm looking at it.
It was kind of exciting when we got it. And we started making teams and channels. We started building stuff out. We could see how you drop it into files. Oh, look, it's going to be backed up in SharePoint. That means I've got my good, solid, HIPAA compliant SharePoint security backing this up. This is great. We've got all those document management features. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Until we found out, so was everyone else in the organization that could see, create a team. If you've been there, feel free to give a shout out. Like, do you remember that moment when you realized, oh yes, everyone is creating sites. There are sites everywhere. And also remember when in the admin portal, you couldn't see the modern team sites very well at all. He's like, Stephen, do you have a PowerShell script? Because we were all going to the admin portal, knowing that with all these teams people are creating. I saw one in one client's environment that just said Bob's team. We were like, what? What is it? What's it for? Now we have a SharePoint site out there called Bob's team. What's Bob doing? We don't know. So, yes, Rob likes my GIF. Thank you. I actually made this GIF myself. I'm a pro at memes. This was my first GIF. So, appreciate that. But what do we do with it?
Let's shout out. I would like to hear from the non-admin people, like what they thought when they realized that people were just creating teams kind of ad hoc. Because I know from the admin side, we were kind of like, what? No, please stop.
Wait, no, please.
But I don't know if everybody felt that way or not. Like, I'm just not sure if it was that moment of terror for everybody or if it was just us.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, please give us your feedback. You guys know you can chat in here anytime you want. Go to the questions. We're keeping an eye on that. And please, please, please let us know. It was super scary. Lori said super scary. Yes, it was. Definitely had those concerns, Caitlin. Not I'm getting some noise.
I don't know what happened.
I just made one of our team members an organizer, and he has muted his microphone. You, Nick.
You should be able to do that for him.
Yeah, I'm going in now. Got him. I tell you, some people's kids.
He's probably in a coffee shop or something.
I know. Eating his avocado toast. A tough lump to swallow and a swing to the other side, but a harbinger of good things to come. You know, that's a really good way to put it. And yes, it is better than shadow IT. It can bridge a gap with like Dropbox and things like that. And the good news is, next slide. Oops, no, I just started the GIF again. The good news is, so Microsoft kind of released Teams and was like, here, let's see if people will use this. And holy moly, we used it. And everyone used it a lot. And we didn't have a lot of control in place because I don't think they were sure how well it would catch on, how well, it would gain traction. And I think it has far exceeded Microsoft's expectations. So they kind of went, oh, shoot, we need to give these people some tools so they can control what we've done to them and what they've done to themselves.
Well, and I think that was, I mean, like my first thought, like when we started using it was, this isn't so bad. Like it seems to work fairly well and all that. And then I realized like, oh wait, no, it works well for anyone. Like they, and so I realized like it didn't have like the rubber bumpers on it that kept you from making some of those big mistakes. But that kind of seems to be a pattern with Microsoft now, that they have like this democratic ideal in their head where, anybody can do anything at first, and then we'll figure out a way to control it after the fact, which I guess has some benefits because it's not, always controlled from the top down.
Yes, and it gives people freedom to be creative. We can't predict how users are going to use the tools we give them, for good or for bad. And sometimes I'll use my dog as an example. Sometimes I talk to my dog and he makes this face and he kind of turns his head because he's really trying hard to understand. Sometimes I feel myself making that face at people when they're telling me what they want, what they would like to do. It's like, I don't understand. I would never have thought of that.
But why?
But why would you do that? But that's not always a bad thing, though, right? That's kind of my snarky admin side coming out. Sometimes it's really awesome to see how creative people can be with these tools. So they're not limiting us, right? They're kind of like, okay, here you go. Everybody can do anything. But now we can bring some order to that because we have some, and they're not all policies, but we have some tools at our disposal. One thing we'll talk about first is how you can use this for your architecture, because you have to plan and be aware and always keep in the front of your mind the fact that when you have a team, you have a site that's married to it in some way. Good news is we can now go and link a team to an existing site. So that can help. There's some real limitations there, not just any site will do. We have archiving available. You can do policies for that to auto archive, or you can go in and manually do it. We can let guests in. This is huge. So my first farm I ever managed was a 2007 farm. I know we've got some folks out there that were in the game well before that. But you know, if you wanted someone that wasn't part of your organization to have access to a SharePoint site in 2007, 2010, it was hard. You were talking about creating Active Directory accounts for them, maybe having additional forests in AD, all kinds of stuff. Now we just click a button, which was spooky. It was spooky to me the first time I saw external sharing in SharePoint Online. Spooky.
Well, and I used to teach an admin class, and I mean, just to think about how quick internet time works sometimes. It was less than 10 years ago when I was teaching that class, and I would tell people that I thought, like my personal opinion was that Microsoft was going to move towards an online Active Directory where each company would have Active Directory hosted with them instead of on premises. And that way, if you wanted to invite someone into your organization, you just connected to their organization and said, okay, give this person's account access to our system. And the people in the class looked at me like I had just grown horns.
If you'd said that to my government friends, people would have freaked out.
Exactly. And, but in a way, even for the government people, like we just had a customer that added me to Teams today, and they do some contracting work for the government. And obviously, I'm not going to name the customer, but it allowed them to just invite our accounts to connect to their teams, which means that they didn't have to give us AD accounts. They didn't have to create new users for us. And so in a way, it allows them to keep more control of their internal environment and more strictly control how people can get in from that external area.
Absolutely.
Instead of like giving them a VPN, because once you give somebody a VPN, they have access to your network, and you may have restricted their abilities in all kinds of ways, but they have a tunnel into your network.
Absolutely. And the good news is if they start to decide that you're kind of sketchy and they don't want you in there anymore, it's very easy for them to go find you as an external user and boot you back out.
Exactly.
It's fantastic. Let's jump over to architecture. I think that's my next slide. So, and this is really big for me. I do a lot of deployment planning sessions where I go on site with clients. That's right. The joy of SharePoint can come to you live and in person. And if that doesn't terrify you, and we sit down and we talk about architecture, especially when it comes to those areas in our environment where we need multiple sites for the same department or team or business unit, however you describe that. Communication sites are awesome. Let's talk about HR. I pick on them all the time. HR has so much data, and a lot of it is for everyone in the company to see, forms to submit, health and wellness events, all that great stuff that needs to be out there on their communication sites. Those used to be our publishing sites, right? Well, they also need an internal department only, where maybe employee reviews live. Those forms people have filled out, those need to be stored somewhere. We got PII in there and all that kind of stuff that not everyone in the company needs to have access to. And we need the security boundary of the new site collection to protect that data. That's our trusty Teams site. But with Microsoft Teams coming in and giving us that modern Teams site, connected to uppercase T for Teams, we've got a broader canvas to work with. We can utilize that team site that Teams creates to be that internal only department site where they work, where they create content, where they manage content, approvals take place, reviews are done, and Teams gives them the space to talk, to share, to organize, and to, I'm going to use the word that I used to tell people don't ever say, collaborate. They can collaborate inside of Teams in a way we've never been able to collaborate before. So
Well, I like that division between, Teams and communication sites.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a very easy conceptual breakdown for people. Like when you're talking about HR, you have an HR communication site that has a lot of that public information, but then you have an HR team site where the people from human resources are brewing all that stuff, and they're holding all the things that are, not meant for public consumption,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes a nice conceptual breakdown, and it's alliterative to say collaboration versus communication, and in some ways, it clears up things, because in the past, I think a lot of times when people said collaboration, they really meant communication. They really meant, we want to be able to give people information. That's not really collaboration. That's a one-sided kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The collaboration is when
it's a monologue, not a dialogue.
Exactly. And so the collaboration is the dialogue, and the communication is the monologue.
Mm-hmm. And was down in Austin a couple of months ago working with some folks through this exact thing. And, the timeout sign, I kept doing that every time we were talking about Microsoft Teams, because it's also a capital T, right? Capital T for Teams, lowercase t for the team site. It gets confusing. It's almost like a tongue twister. Mm-hmm. So I've started using collaboration site to describe team sites, SharePoint team sites, those places where it's boots on the ground work gets done, because it helps cut through the confusion. Because I've had people say, oh, we're really starting to look at team sites, and they mean Microsoft Teams team sites, not those old-fashioned classic SharePoint team sites. So if you're trying to cut through some confusion, maybe interchange lowercase t team with collaboration site. And the reason I picked on that word collaboration earlier is like, people, we want to be able to collaborate. Well, what does that mean to you? So that used to just be a buzzword people would throw out as an action. It's a verb. We want to do stuff. But now, it's more meaningful, like you said. That it becomes the where your department, your business unit gets together and dialogues over data and documentation.
Yeah, I had a class when I was in college. It was an interpersonal communications class, and the professor who taught it was really just a horrible professor, and it was a required class for almost everything. And during the test, he would go like from building to building, because there were so many people who had to take the class that they were all in different buildings. And when he was in our room for the test, there was one of the questions on the test that said, in your opinion. And I raised my hand when he came in, and he came over, and I showed him the picture or the question. And I was like, you don't really mean in our opinion, do you? And he looked at me and he was like, oh no, I never want to know your opinion.
Nice.
That's really kind of how people are with collaboration. Sometimes they really don't want to dialogue. In some cases, they really just want to have a place to post information. And so it is a clarifying moment sometimes when you say there's a difference between communicating and collaborating.
And the cool thing is, if you need a landing page to be able to get to all your sites regardless, Hub Sites to the rescue. And that mega menu should be coming into play any second now, if it's out there for some of you, or it's not in our tenant yet, so I haven't had a chance to play with it. But yeah, you can connect those sites regardless of communication or team sites to your hub site. That doesn't unify their permissions, so permissions can still stay intact, but you can get to all of your department or business unit sites and resources by utilizing that hub. Maybe we need to do another webinar on hub sites. All right.
Well, and you can also reassign them easily. So
yes,
it's not static the way it used to be, where if something was a sub-site, you know, it was difficult to do anything with it without like a migration tool or something. But with the hub sites, you can reassign something to another group pretty easily.
Lincoln logs. Some people say Legos, but I'm going to kick it old school and say Lincoln logs. Anybody out there remember Lincoln logs? Man, you can build stuff up, moving around. They're great. Old school. I'm showing my age. All right, policies. Guess what, folks? We got a lot of policies now. Naming conventions, classification of your teams, guest access. Who can create teams? You can limit it to administrators. Not a bad idea if, and that if is like in italics, but also underlined. I would maybe think about having something in place where users in your environment can go through, we'll say it, training. Learn when to create a team, when not to create a team. I think Lori said earlier, not everyone needs a team. That is not wrong. Not everyone needs a team. I kind of like to play Oprah and give everybody what they want all the time, but our environment is not always the place to do that. So let's say Stephen and I need to work with Nick for a client and get together some documentation and some information. It's all this stuff. We don't need a team for that. The three of us can just have a little chat space. We can just start chatting. We can add Nick to our chat, talk about it there, share files there, knock out the work. You don't have to have an official team to do something like that. Microsoft's given us the ability to reserve specific names. That's fantastic. We're going to dig a little deeper into naming policies in just a minute, but you have some tools here. First one I'm going to jump into, though, is archiving and retention. It's a big deal, especially if our environment was one of those ones where users just went, oh, sweet, I can make my own team, and they went crazy. You can set it up such that like, anytime a new team gets created, you could put a timer on that, basically. If I wanted to be super strict, maybe I'd say 90 days. And at the end of 90 days, whoever created that team will get an email saying, hey, would you like to keep your team for another 90 days? Guess what happens if they don't? Bye. Now, you don't have to just delete it, right? You can do, you can be kind and just do a little bit of archiving for that, or you can just kill it. I mean, it just depends on how brutal. Stephen, what would you do?
I tend to be more on the brutal side of things. So I would probably, can it. But I think that's just my first instinct. Most likely you or somebody else would tell me not to do that. And
be kind to users.
Yes, then I would make it, just sort of an archive or store situation.
Yep. And there's, I want to show this. Let me see. You don't have to go policy to archive.
No.
I always get nervous. Well, that's not what I want to do. When I try to switch my screen show taskbar. Here we go. Yay.
Yes.
So,
I see
perfect. So this is a team in Teams. This is my own little joy of SharePoint world. And so far, we only have one team, and it's the fun team. But let's say it's time for the fun team to be archived because I can't ever think of a day when the joy of SharePoint wouldn't be fun. But if you go to Manage Teams and see this gear down at the bottom, I'm kind of circling with my pointer, that can take you into your Manage Teams location, and all your different teams would be listed here. And I can either come here, no I can't, I have to go to this one, strike that from the record. Off to the far right, I have the ability to archive this team. Is it manual? Yes. Stephen and I were talking about this mere moments before the webinar started. Not everything has to be automated. And especially if you're moving forward. You put a policy in place for archive and retention moving forward. But maybe like you talked to Bob about Bob's team and he was like, oh no, I'm not really using that. I just wanted to know what it would do. Awesome. You can go archive that team. This will freeze all team activity. Notice you could choose to make it read only. So if maybe Bob had some documents and files in there and he's like, oh, what if I ever need to go back and get them? You can do that. So it can be read only, or it could just be archived. I'm just going to archive it. Archiving my only team. So now I have this archive section here, and it just takes them from that upper level, bumps them down into archive. And it's pretty instantaneous. But if I change my mind, I can restore it. I actually had a test team in our Pait tenant that I restored and archived and restored and archived like 5 times just to get some screenshots I needed for an upcoming blog. It didn't seem to mess anything up. I'm kind of surprised. But I can restore it. I could delete it. I'm just going to restore. So it doesn't have to be automated. It doesn't have to be done with a policy. The owner of a team could choose in this Manage Teams area of Teams to go ahead and archive out any things. Is that only available if they create?
Yeah, Rusty had a couple of questions there. And yes, Rusty, you have to be an owner of the team itself. So even if you're an admin on Office 365, you may not be an owner of the team. You can make yourself an owner, and then you would have the archive possibility.
Because you got the power.
Yeah. And that, so part of what we were talking about when we were saying, it's hard to plan ahead and say like, okay, we've got this one project that's starting and we know that this project's going to be at least a year, and then this other project is, this week, like we're just planning like our company picnic or something. And so sometimes it's hard to set retention policies for those kinds of things, but you can go and just use the standard tools in Office 365 to see how long it's been since somebody has done anything. And just go through and say, I'm going to send out some emails. I'm going to say, is it okay if I archive these? And you don't have to do it all by policy. You can just say, what happens to the team site when a team is archived? It depends on how you archive it. Yeah. So if you archive to delete it, then it goes away.
But now if I did it here, so I went up with my the one I killed and brought back from the dead a few times in the other tenant, the team site in SharePoint remains active. That those documents are still in place. Nothing changes on the SharePoint side of the world when I archive manually here in Teams. It just closes it down here as far as chat goes. In fact, I think I took some screenshots of it too. I could still work with the documents when I had it in read only. And I added a document in the SharePoint site and it still showed up in the files tab of my read only archived team environment, which I thought was interesting. It's still paying attention. You just can't chat in there anymore and build out channels and all that fun stuff. But it's still aware. It's kind of odd. It's like it's almost sleepwalking, I think. And we're guilty. You know how sometimes the cobbler's children don't have shoes? At Pait, I'll confess, we've been bad about cleaning up our closed projects. So that's actually on my plate in the next No, I'm going to bump that to March. In March, I'm going to start talking to folks about some of our older projects and just archive those gently here where we can go back and grab stuff if we need it.
Yeah, you've got stuff to do this month.
I know. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Someone was asking, they said they're the team owner and they can't see the option to archive. I can't say why that would happen, but my guess is that maybe someone in the admin side of their tenant has been reading ahead on the stuff that we're talking about here, and they may have made some policy changes. That's just my guess, though. So it's hard to say why that would happen.
Yeah. But if that person is you, let's see, what is it? Is it under manage the team? Yeah, let me go back to that. Was it Firefox? Yeah, so let me jump out here away from it. So here I'm in my fun team, my virtual happy hour channel with one of my favorite gifts ever.
She really does love that one.
I do. I really do. So I'm going to go to the left-hand side down to the bottom, to the right of where it says join or create team. I'm going to click that gear, or for any of you all in the UK, cog. And that's going to take me to manage teams. And I go way out here to the right, and I can archive the team. If you're having trouble with that, or if that's not here for you and it does show membership owner, again, it may be an admin has set a setting. If you are the admin who would set the setting and you're pretty sure you didn't do it, I'll have my contact information at the end of the presentation. Feel free to shoot me a screenshot and I'll do a few minutes worth of research for you and see if I can't see what's going on for you. Okay. So, helpful hint. Oh, cool. Okay, good deal, Stephen. Not you, Stephen, the other Stephen. Setting expiration policies will help limit sprawl. You know, the biggest topic of conversation for SharePoint has always been sprawl. SharePoint sprawl is a real thing. Using these tools can really help with that quite a bit. Food for thought. Since it's Valentine's Day, it's our little date night setting here. Yeah, we don't really want anyone and everyone out there creating teams and going crazy. Training is really important, and you can utilize, we'll talk about this too, groups and policies to ensure that the correct people are out there. But we don't really want to limit creativity to a degree. Maybe you do. I tend to say we don't. So if you don't want to restrict by group policy, utilizing an expiration date is really a good way to go. This is actually how Microsoft handles it internally. If you are a Microsoft employee, not a contractor, an employee, you have the right to create a team, which means also a SharePoint site. But they have a policy, so the clock starts ticking, and they'll start getting reminded. I don't remember what they said their time frame is. Maybe 6 months. Hey, is this team still being used? Is this active? Do you want it? And if they never respond, obviously it's not that important. It's like our old server days. If no one claims the server, you turn it off and see who yells. Right? Boom, archived. So let's talk about guest access. This is huge. Guest access lets you invite in maybe a client, a vendor, a colleague from another company to come in and be a part of your team, which means share files, chat, join meetings. It's not necessary for the meetings aspect. It's just like Skype, right? You can send a Skype invite out to anybody you want to. You can send a meeting invite through Teams out to anybody you want to. They just have to have an email address to accept your invitation as a guest into Teams. This is not external sharing. This does not give them access into the SharePoint site in the background. Just Teams. Big difference. And granular control. We've got some teams where we have some members of our clients that come in and can chat with us, and we manage our meetings. We use the wiki tab for like task lists and notes. We've got Planner going. It's a great single point of communication that has significantly reduced really long email threads. Hallelujah. What are your thoughts?
You don't like sending the same document via email like 15 times?
I do not. I'm sure everybody else does. Everyone loves when you've been copied in on an email thread for 6 weeks. There was one file attached and shared one time, and now you got to dig through and open up each thread of the conversation to find exactly where that attachment is. That's great.
Yes. Well, and I also like the fact that this is not just Office 365 users. So
Yes.
if you have someone that you want to invite and they don't have Office 365, you know, you mentioned while you were sharing your screen earlier, like the stuff that you were showing us for Teams, you're actually doing through Firefox. You're not using the Teams application for it. And that's the web interface for Teams is really pretty complete.
Pretty
Like
darn good.
the only things it doesn't do, you know, almost exactly the same way the client does are the communication functions that involve like voice or video. But otherwise, you can chat, you can archive things, you can, you can work with it almost completely as if it were native through the web browser. And so that's really helpful for, like for us, a lot of our customers, they're just getting started on Office 365. It would be a waste of time for us to invite them into a team if they already had to have Teams installed everywhere and they already had to have all the Microsoft stuff all set up, but the fact that they can just get through a browser makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, and I'll admit something. I use the web app for Teams to cheat. So out there on the user voice, there's a thread going on about how it would be nice if it were easier to switch between tenants in Teams, because you have to do the whole log off, log in rigmarole. So if I get an email notification that one of my clients has mentioned me in Teams, it's the, you're missing the action or something like that, I'll go sign into office.com with the account I need for that client and just open Teams there, so I don't have to sign off of my internal team environment.
Next time you get that, try it again, though. That story has gotten better.
Okay. All right, fine. I'll do it. I won't like it, but I'll do it.
I mean, that's the problem sometimes with the workarounds that we find is that this is a moving target. Teams is something that Microsoft is very focused on, and they're doing a lot of work around it. And so things do change. And even though you're not reinstalling it, and even though it's not very flashy about its updates, the Teams client is constantly updating.
Yes, it is. That's true. Remember that word evergreen that Microsoft started using a lot about a year and a half ago? It's true. It's true. That's the nice way to put it, right? It's evergreen. Constantly changing, growing, and evolving, which is, for me, it's like Christmas. I love it when I find out that there's something new available. Not everyone shares that. Some people are like, well, crap, now what's different? It's fun and exciting for me.
Stop the world, I want to get off.
Just drink some more coffee and jump right in.
Yeah.
It's not the Barbra Streisand song.
You have a problem.
No, it's fine. Again, that's how I get my adrenaline rush. There's a new feature. Let's do a live demo of it.
No, I just meant with coffee. It's fine that you're good with changes in Teams, but you have a problem with caffeine.
I don't think I do.
Yeah, okay. And that's why we can't help you yet.
I'm not ready for help. Let's see. We got some questions here. Can you control guest permissions within Teams so they can only see certain documents or conversations. That would be new. The presumption is if you're inviting them into that team, then you want them there for everything. So channels, even if you create separate channels, which I highly recommend for organizing conversations and topics, full access throughout. If you have certain content that's traditionally been in your team and you're going to let a guest in, it may be time to pull that out and have it in a separate document library in the site. But now you're having to go to two places. So I guess it's kind of that conversation to start having internally. It's like, do we want the guest here or not? And which do we want to work the most with, the content or the person? Kind of juggle that.
And that does kind of fight it, you know, like it fights against some of the things that have caused problems in the past with SharePoint. And you and I have talked about it a lot, Joy, where there's an instinct that people have to like just build walls around everything in SharePoint. Like at first they create a subsite and then they break the inheritance for that. And then they create a library and they break the inheritance for that. And then they create a folder and they break the inheritance for that. And then there are 3 documents in that folder that they break the inheritance for. And that stuff causes a lot of issues. So that over permissioning of things is something that Teams doesn't make very easy.
Correct. And so I've never been a fan of the presence of lots of broken permissions in SharePoint. So the fact that I can see it both ways. The fact that, let's say I have, well, our Pait team, we've got a boatload of channels. So, and for those of you that are curious or maybe haven't played around with as much, a channel, it's just like a topic thread that you can create inside of Teams. So we've got our fun room, we've got our, do we have development, we have the general conversation. We just have a lot of channels where if you have a specific type of conversation you want to have, go to the channel. But you can't keep anyone that's in the team from seeing a specific channel. And I like that because if you're part of Pait, you should have access to all of the conversations in the Pait team. So if it's a breach of security for a guest to see something, then it doesn't belong in Teams, is really the long and the short. And there are different ways you can handle that.
Right.
Without going into too much details. We still got a few more slides to get through. Let's see what functionality it gives us. If we have time at the end, Steve, yes, I'll do a demo on creating a channel. Rusty, you're fine. Yeah, we'll run through at the end for anyone that can stay. We'll do that. Anyone that needs to drop off, no hard feelings. So we'll just run through that in a minute. So let me go ahead and let's talk about naming policies. Stephen and I have been talking about naming policies a lot leading up to today. Naming policies are pretty awesome because you can identify your teams by a variety of prefixes and or suffixes to identify the purpose. So my example there was that it's Group HR Training USA. So I can look at that. Usually create a training team, which I have actually done recently. Who's it for? What kind of training? Is it specific to anything in particular? You don't know. But if you have prefixes and suffixes, I automatically see that it's HR training for the USA location. So good ability to identify purpose and audience in your teams. So you as the admin can go through and not have to guess what's going on here. You know just by looking at the names of the teams. You can also prevent folks from creating teams that sound official. We've got some clients that have run into this where somebody in IT created an IT team, but it wasn't the official IT team. They were just goofing around, seeing what they could do with this new tool. So you can set up blocked words that keep people from grabbing your namespace. So you're not having to fight over official architecture names. take it away, Stephen. I know you've got some things to say here.
Well, the first thing I want to say is we've been talking about teams, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but these policies are actually for groups and
True.
teams.
True.
So, we're not going to go into the difference between a group and a team and all that because, like I said, it is a bit of a rabbit hole. I believe your helpful hint here where it says select administrators can be exempt from the naming policies, use this power wisely. This is an important point because when you set these policies, like when you block certain words like HR or IT or administration, that doesn't apply to some of the higher level administrators. So they can still create those official HR, IT groups and things like that. So that's, I believe, why they are exempt, but they are truly exempt from things like the prefix and suffix policies. So when you're naming something, it will force that prefix and suffix unless you're an administrator. So if you actually have those in there for organizational reasons, you need to remember to put them in there when you're naming something else. Like when you're naming a group and you're doing it as an administrator, you have to remember to manually do the USA at the end if you have to have those suffixes there for people to understand, what region or something that group belongs to. The other thing is there are some licensing implications, and I know that there were some people who thanked us earlier for listing the licensing stuff. It's probably a little bit more than you would expect because it does force any members of the groups that are using those group naming policies to, well, I shouldn't say it forces, it requires. I don't think it stops you. I don't think it's like an actual mechanism anywhere, but they're required to have the premium P1 licenses for Active Directory. And a lot of people don't have those. And it is an extra cost if you're doing the rack rate or it's part of your enterprise agreement. So that's something that you want to look at before you engage these policies. It's a little frustrating because I think it probably would let you do it, but then you are out of compliance. And at any point, Microsoft could make a change where it really did require it. Right now, I doubt it does physically require it. And all the information that we're giving you right now, as you can see on this page, it says preview, and it's less than a month old. And the other link that we have is, I think it's less than 2 weeks old. And it has the same information, but this is still all preliminary. So Microsoft is still taking feedback on these things. If you guys have something that you want to tell them about the licensing requirements or how any of these policies work, please go to the user voice and, give your voice to things because they look at that stuff. And so they have this in mind now. This is how they think it's going to work. And this is how it's supposed to work right now. But like I said, it probably doesn't stop you. And that's a pattern with Microsoft. They have been, building things without the rubber bumpers, like I said. And so you probably could go and engage all this stuff by just having a couple of users who have that premium license, and you have to install like a preview version of some of the AD tools. And then you could set these policies and the naming conventions and all that. And it probably wouldn't stop you from adding people to it when they don't have proper licensing. But that just turns into a nightmare for you later. So be careful. And I've stepped off my soapbox now, Joy.
But it's a good soapbox. And we were talking about Evergreen. Sorry, I was answering a couple questions real quick. So notice the date of this, 1/27/2019. And I've got another tab open here. Created 2/06/2019, right? There's a lot of information out there. Here, I'm not saying that this is changing information, but it's good to stay up to date because they're dropping content out frequently. And again, here's this is Office 365 groups, but to use your phrase, we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole. We only have a total hour here today, but the group is what's behind that team, right? So
Right.
the
All
group,
teams are groups, not all groups are teams.
correct. So it's really something you have to keep in mind. More to come on that in a future webinar. By the way, here's a little plug for you guys too. If there's certain topics and stuff you would like for us to cover on Joy of SharePoint, hit me up on Twitter or shoot me an email or something, and I'd be happy to know what you guys would like to cover. I'm going to go back to the slides. So yes, be aware. There are restrictions here. There are certain licensing things that, like Stephen covered, that you just really need to make sure is in place for the stuff to work the way it needs to. Food for thought as we sit down at our Valentine's Day table. Using these prefixes and suffixes can really help identify purposes. You can use geographic region, department, project. It's recommended that you use attributes that are in place in Active Directory. Sometimes that's kind of neglected. There's a lot of, Stephen, how many times have we gone to do some kind of implementation in SharePoint and they want to know why people profiles are showing the wrong information?
Mm-hmm.
You know, AD is still king when it comes to a lot of stuff.
Right. And that's, I mean, this is a point of frustration for a lot of organizations. When they do this stuff, they want to fly at it. Like they're like, you know, we set up Teams and we sent out an email to everybody and we've had it for 3 days now. And we just realized that anybody can create a team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you do have to put some thought into these things ahead of time. You know, that's Microsoft has created a beast that you can't just let loose without a little planning, because
Right.
their thought is that you are going to look at all of your requirements, have a plan, and all of those things. And I've always said that Microsoft has a little bit of a blind spot. And it's a blind spot that hides the majority of their customers from them. Their documentation will talk about how to do a test implementation for something, and then they'll have documentation on how to do it at an enterprise scale.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say an enterprise scale, I mean like, you know, giant corporation. And they miss that spot in the middle where there are a lot of organizations that just have, you know, anywhere from 10 to even maybe 1,000 users. You know, that is that sort of middle market that Microsoft has a lot of business in, but they kind of miss it in their own documentation, in their own planning. They expect a company with like 25 people to turn rolling out Office 365 into like a 6-month event. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not what a lot of those customers do. They log in, they set up like 2 administrators, and they just start rolling out sites, and they turn on Teams, and they start putting email addresses in, and then they start to see the sprawl problems.
Yeah.
And they come to us and they're like, well, how do I take it all back? And it's like, well, once it's done, it's done. Like it's a cleanup project at that point. You have to do a bunch of migration and renaming and you
Work.
know, yeah, work.
And that's what we're here for, right?
Well, hopefully we're here for the planning phase.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes.
But a lot of times we are part of the Roto-Rooter team.
Sometimes
we are the cleanup people.
Yep. We're happy to do both. Let me see. So you can force a naming schema is a question we have. I like that force is all uppercase. We have an admin in the room. I'm guessing, Steve, you're an admin for that kind of question. Force, yeah, pretty much. They'll get, like, say someone tries to use a blocked word, they'll get a notification when they're trying to name the team saying, hey, you can't use that word, pick something else. Is it a requirement for the users who create the naming policies, or everyone who is invited to a group that uses them?
When it says, is that a requirement? I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah. So we have a lot of
So
Steves and Stevens, but Steven, if you could give us a smidge of clarification, I'm sure you probably typed that while we were talking, and we would have made sense if we'd seen it then. But if you're talking about like the enforcement of the policies, if you're one of the admins that, did I have it on the slide? Hang on.
you do have on the slide that admins are sometimes exempt.
Yes, I can get you some more clarification after the webinar on which admins are exempt, and it would be one of the ones that's creating the policy would have that exemption. So I hope that helps. So the Teams and Skype admin portal, yes, Skype is still mentioned. Lots of policies you can do just inside of Teams. Guest access. Again, that's not one of those PowerShell scripts you have to do like the naming policies. Guest access can be turned on under the org-wide settings drop down. I'm going to toggle over to this in just a minute. You can also create messaging policies. So should owners be allowed to delete a message that a user sent? Maybe, I don't know. Should users be allowed to delete their own sent messages? I mean, I think it's nice. Sometimes we make mistakes. Read receipts. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. If they're annoying like Outlook, I say no. But if it's just letting you know that someone's seen it, maybe that would be useful. At Pait, we just use the little like. So I maybe didn't like what you said, but I'm acknowledging that you said it. It's kind of how I think we use it internally. Chat. I almost don't feel like should want to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this. You can choose whether or not you want to allow your users to chat inside of Teams. Please don't turn off the ability to chat inside of Teams. I know some folks have done it, and it turned their channels into chaos. And let's be honest, if you're not letting them chat in Teams, they're going to go chat somewhere else. And we don't want...
It also can turn them into a wasteland.
Oh my gosh, yeah, for sure. I can share a document with Stephen via chat, and there's data loss prevention baked into Teams, into Office 365. So I know that content's safe. If you're not letting me chat in Teams, I'm going to go to Slack, or I'm going to text, or something. Now I'm potentially sending confidential, proprietary information outside of company resources, right? So be cool. Let people chat. Giphies, memes, stickers, those are all there. You could choose to turn them off, but don't. I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. If they make you nervous, you can kind of set some content ratings. You can have no restriction, moderate, or strict. I think we're on moderate because let's be honest, we're a company of IT people, so it could get a bit crazy.
I'm actually surprised we have any setting at all.
Me too. It was really great though. Last year at the North American Collaboration Summit, Mark, Stephanie, and I were doing a workshop, and Mark went to demo our Teams. And I forget whose birthday it was, maybe Nick's birthday, but he goes to it. It was the Pait team channel, and there was Chris Farley jumping out of the cake as the Chippendale dancer. That was awesome. Really awesome. Of course, it would happen to Mark that's what would be on the screen when you go to demo.
Of course.
It was my birthday, yes.
Yes, thank you, Nick. It means it's almost your birthday again. You're so old.
Correct. But that'll be all my 2 cents though.
So why should the business care about GIFs and memes? These opinions are strictly those of the joy of SharePoint, but I still think they're correct. It makes you human to the person getting the message. It kind of makes up for the fact that you can't read their body language, you can't see their facial expressions, and you're not hearing a tone. It's actually a little snippet of a conversation that Nick and I had a while back where no one told me, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And I really was. It wasn't a flip sorry. It was, oops, my bad, sorry. Teams has really, my opinion, helped us as a team at Pait get to know each other better because of the personalization of the GIFs and the memes. I don't play a lot with the stickers, almost because I feel like it's worked. I have to pick the right one. I do pride myself in my use of memes in business conversations. It really can bridge that gap. We are a company of remote workers. We were about to have one of our guys move to Alaska. We've got people in Colorado, Florida, New York, Connecticut. I'm smack dab in the middle of Oklahoma, and then we've got a few people in Cincinnati. Oh, a couple people in Canada. We don't see each other a lot. And the GIFs help.
Well, and I mean, people hear us on this this webinar, and you know, we're making jokes back and forth and all that. I've met you exactly once.
Yep.
You know, so I have met Joy for one day. We have a lot of customers who have spent more time in a room with Joy than I have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I know a lot about Joy's life. I know how her dogs behave. I know about her upcoming wedding. I know a bunch of things, and we talk all the time. And a lot of it happens via chat. And you know, so I do know what her choice of memes indicates. You know, and so it does give you a sense of the person after you spend a little time talking to them.
Absolutely. And especially if you're a remote organization, that's huge. Okay, so we're a minute over. Apologies. There's so much to talk about in Teams. If you guys are wanting to actually go like eat lunch on your lunch hour or something, here's our contact info. If you want to hang around, I will do that little channel demo. So if you've got the time, please do hang out. If you've got to run, thank you for sticking with us for the full hour. You're awesome. Teams is big. That's all I'm going to say. It's big. Okay, so I've got our emails up there. I'll put this back up in a few minutes after I do the channel demo, if anyone wants to jot it down. And of course, the recording is going to be available, so even if you do nothing but go fast forward to our emails address, you'll have it. All right. I'm going to show the taskbar. I'm going to find Teams. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to click on my Teams tab. So this is the fun team. When I click on the title here, this basically is like the overview of your team. If anyone has requested, if you've got that turned on to join, you could see here. And if you have channels, they live here. Kind of trying to think about the best way to go about this. I'm going to add a channel. So this is my fun team. We do fun things. Maybe sometimes we get together and we have planning sessions, because sometimes you need to plan how you're going to have fun. I'm going to add. You could put a description that is searchable. You could also say for everyone that's in the team, this is now going to be one of their favorites. That affects how their notifications work. I'm rarely presumptuous enough to say, yes, I want this channel to be everybody's new favorite. You know, it just seems rude. So now when I look in my navigation panel, I have my team. Here's the general channel, and this is where we just chit-chat about general fun stuff. Now, if I want to specifically talk about our next planning session, I would like for that to be in its own channel, so our conversations stay organized. And that's the whole point of these channels, is organization. So next is March 5th, because that's the next day I'll be back in the office. Don't forget. If I wanted to make this important, I can do that and send it. So the question was, what is this doing to the site when you're adding these channels? That's a great question. I go to files. This is usually how I jump over to SharePoint when I'm inside of my team. I just go to the Files tab of wherever I am and click Open in SharePoint. I really hope I don't have to sign in again.
You don't.
Yay, I don't. Let you know. Oh, I'm not in Edge. That's right. I did do this in Firefox. Okay. So I'm going to click on my breadcrumb to go into Documents. So notice I have General. Any files that are added are put into the General folder in SharePoint. That is equal to the General channel in my team. If I added any content to planning sessions, check. Let me just find something and I'll do that. Let me see. Training. I'm on my other screen. Sure, I'll just grab this in. I'm just going to drag and drop. I think that will go into my channel. Or my files. If not, I'll do it again. Yay! Isn't that cool? I drag and drop it into the conversation. It also goes into the files. Yay, I love how it works. So I'm going to go to my Fun Team site. I'm going to refresh. And I like how the tab in the web app shows me which channel I was in too. And I open planning sessions. And my document will go into the appropriate folder that corresponds to the channel. Oh yeah, Steve, you are very welcome. Let me see. I know the Files tab is the SharePoint document library folder. What's Wiki give you? Oh yeah, I'll show you that in a minute too. You guys are rock stars for hanging in here with us on this, by the way. I'm gonna go back. Look at my channels list. I could have gone over here too, right? All roads lead to wherever you go. GIFs, memes don't go into files, but yeah, this keeps my conversation organized. So if you were a client of ours, maybe we have an Office 365 deployment project, right? So we would have a team, name the name of your company. General channel is just what you get. That's just like the shared documents that you always get with every site in SharePoint, right? It's just generic. We would create a channel for all files and conversations surrounding the deployment planning. Maybe you decide you want a Teams proof of concept. Well, I would come in here, create a new channel for Teams proof of concept. All that documentation would go in there and it stays organized. And if I wanted to go to the SharePoint side of the world, it's one-stop shopping, all right here. Now the wiki, I love the wiki. It's just a notepad, basically, where you can put information. For our clients, usually in the general channel, we'll start a wiki, and that's where we put our onboard information, like credentials, URL, who's doing what, just general information anyone that's joining the project needs to know. And then if we have specific information for specific topics of the project, that would go in the appropriate channels wiki. But wait, there's more.
The wikis are also suspiciously like OneNote.
Don't say that. Do not offend my wikis. I don't like OneNote, guys. I'm sorry. It's just me. It's slow. Copy and paste is funky. Some of you out there can do amazing things with OneNote. That's not me. But yes, you could put a OneNote notebook in here for all of that information. And you know, it's OneNote, so it's available in a lot of places. But you can create tabs to different document libraries in SharePoint, to other sites, to different resources, to your stream channel, pretty much anywhere you want to go. The Teams version is there's a tab for that. And look at all this stuff. It's crazy. Not all of this is free. If some of this stuff is like a premium app or something, there's probably going to be something that the owner of that app's going to want some money for. But yeah, you got a YouTube channel right there. It's pretty cool.
That's also important to note that not all of these, well, most of these are not Microsoft.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they go outside of the Microsoft universe. And it's also difficult, like, when Steve James was asking about, what happens when you do the wiki, it can be hard to track everything in Teams back to a physical artifact somewhere else. Like, it's hard to find the conversations in each channel somewhere else. That's why you have Teams, to kind of bring all that stuff together.
Yep.
So if you're trying to track down all of the items physically somewhere else, it may not be that easy to do. There are ways to back it up and there are ways to export it, but I wouldn't get too far down the rabbit hole of trying to track down physically where everything exists. That's why you're using Teams, is so it's all unified.
And search is pretty cool. I was on the phone call with Ryan, the other day, and we had a request to see branding examples. I was like, you sent me a sway once. I just went to search, typed in sway, and like my third result was where Ryan had sent me the links to his branding sways. Seconds later, we were showing the client sway. It was really cool just to go, oh, I know I've got that in Teams somewhere. Boom, there it is. I just had to search for it.
I do find the search a little irritating sometimes because we have a lot of content. And so, like you search for sway, sometimes it'll be, the third one down. And sometimes, like if you look for, SOW, we do lots of statements of work. It can be difficult to find things sometimes in their search. The search is very much a cloud. It doesn't give you a lot of granularity, like I want to search in this one particular area. So when you do the search, it's pretty wide open. It'll find files everywhere. It'll find conversations everywhere. So you have to adjust your thinking a little bit to get good results out of that search.
And there are a lot of shortcuts too. Like when I'm in Pait, I'll do go to, and then just start typing the name of the team I want to switch to, instead of actually having to finding it in the navigation, because that's a lot of scrolling these days. So there's a lot of ways to work with this. There's a lot of good content out there. Let me see. See if we have any other questions. Looks like the wiki pages are stored in another library called Teams Wiki. They're Googling. Good job, Steve. So yeah, channels at the moment cannot be secured independently of the team. So if you're in Fun Team, you automatically have access to all the channels that get created. I've heard that could change in the future. Don't know. That's just conversation out on the interwebs. Okay. Any other questions?
I would also caution anybody about, like, getting overly clever with the permissions, like being like, oh, it's just a folder, so I can break the permissions on the folder.
Don't do it. Thank you for bringing that up. Don't change the folder structure in SharePoint that ties back to Teams. Wailing and gnashing of teeth, don't do it. You could, I've done this, I tested it, I've got a blog out there on it. You could create a view. You could come here and create a view, not this one. You don't change all documents, but you could create a new view that doesn't show folders. If folders offend you, or if you just want to be able to see everything here, go create a new view without the folders. But don't mess with the folders. Just please, please, please. If you want to see what happens, go create a test team admins and destroy it, because it will mess stuff up.
Okay. Well, and even if it does work, like if your goal is to like hide one of the channels from guest users, and you take them out of the permissions for that channel folder, and that works. First of all, it works for the files of that channel, but that doesn't necessarily block them from the conversation,
Right.
and all those things. And Microsoft can change this anytime because they're assuming that you're going to leave that stuff alone. Do we recommend that you could use the SharePoint site separately to the Teams? I mean, you can just use it separately. You can just go in and do things, and it might be easier to load items in, and you can create like pages and things like that that don't show up in the Teams application. So you can create, or you can treat it as a normal Teams site, but just don't get over aggressive with making changes that would alter how the Teams application would try to interact with it. So things like messing around with the permissions and things like that. If you create another document library in here, it's not exposed in Teams.
Nope. So that's
unless
how
you set up a tab for it.
Access thing. Well, we want a guest in Teams, but not in SharePoint. You can do whatever you want over here in SharePoint. Just stay out of the documents library, create another one, because it's just a site. Right? It's just a SharePoint site. You can do what you've always done. Now, if you let them in through external access, now they're in. Can you create subfolders in the Teams interface in the channel? No. The channels basically are the subfolders, and that's about as far down as that can go.
And that means that you can't create a subfolder in the files. So that's been a point of irritation for some people. Like if you're in the files tab of a channel, you can't create folders in there.
Yeah. But they are going to be releasing the ability to any custom columns you add, which you can do in SharePoint because you may have some document management stuff you need to do. Eventually, that custom metadata and the new columns will surface in Teams. I'm looking forward to that.
I would like for it to be able to do like the views and things like that.
Yeah, they're saying it's coming.
But they're very careful not to say when.
Oh, Caitlin says they have been able to do folders and channel files. That's got to be a little bit newer then. Okay, groovy. Thank you for the update.
Can you create them in the interface?
Let's find out.
I don't see one. I mean, you can create them in the library, but that's kind of the sort of thing that I would avoid.
Look at that. Look at it. Look at it.
Well, there you go. Yeah, so that is new.
Though, okay, I'm not a folder fan.
Yeah, I'm a little irritated that there are folders in the document library, honestly.
I know, it bugs me. But that's okay. It's okay. We're just going to accept it and move on. Evergreen, yes. Yes.
And I feel like that's one of those decisions, kind of like subsites, that Microsoft's going to regret in a few years, that they're going to be like, oh, maybe we should have made each channel a document library. Maybe you should have.
Maybe they should have, because they preach flat architecture, yet they're foldering us. These opinions are those of the joy of SharePoint. Keep that in mind. All right. What else you guys got for us? I agree. You guys are awesome. I expect Steve, Steven, Caitlin, Rusty, you guys have to keep joining in over and over again because this has been a ton of fun. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you hanging out. Let us know what you're doing next. Will do. And let me know if you have any requests.
I love that they think you've got it all planned out.
I know. Yeah. I'm going to be in the Bahamas in 9 days, so that's all that's on my mind. Thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate you being here. Oh, thanks, Stephen. See, I'm going to have a big head. I've gotten compliments. I'm going to be completely unmanageable for the rest of the day.
Luckily, I can just hang up after this.
Pretty much. All right. So I'm going to go ahead then. And, oh, I'm a bad host. I should have put our contact info back up. So if you're still here, contact info. I'm going 8:20 in the UK, time for dinner. Go eat. Yes,
absolutely.
Eat now. You sacrificed food for joy of SharePoint. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to go on mute. One of the few times I'm ever quiet. Thank you again, guys. You are awesome, and we'll catch you next month.
Bye, all. Thanks for joining.
And thank you for being here, Stephen, and Steve, and Stephen.
Is that all of us? Steve?
Stick with you too. Want to?
Thank you, Nick, for joining and keeping us straight.
Yeah, I was just the chat, I guess, admin, and a lot of great questions today, guys. So thanks for all the participation.
Yes, so much.
Just for clarification, Nick, are you in a coffee shop?
No, I am not in a coffee shop.
I just wondered.
Probably is eating avocado toast, though. Okay, I'm muting now.
Oh, we're going to beat that dead horse. Okay. All right, I am signing off. We'll talk to you soon.